Welcome back, everybody, to the Laugh Cry Club. I'm Joy.
I'm Rebecca.
We are two licensed therapists here to talk about things, talk about life. We've been here over 100 episodes, which is very exciting for us because making a podcast is not easy, friends. Consistency is key. We meet here every week. We want to share information that's helpful for your mental health. And last week we discussed a documentary called The Crash. So go back and listen to that episode. We mentioned a few episodes ago that, Rebecca and I have a history with criminal justice. And so we started to kind of get into this groove of like, these might be interesting situations to discuss, not from there's a million true crime podcasts out there.
Right.
This is not what we're aiming for. We are aiming more for, wow, these are really interesting and dangerous dynamics that I think could potentially help people by explaining dynamics with people, how they behave, why they behave a certain way, in the hopes that you, listener, can educate yourself and also look for warning signs maybe for people in your life. So we're going to talk today about a documentary that's on Netflix currently called Maternal Instinct. I just want to give a warning to the listeners. Well, first of all, if you have not yet seen it, highly recommend watching it before you listen to this episode, and or also know that this is a very sad, tragic, and disturbing documentary. People lost lives, families were destroyed, and I want to be very sensitive to the victims of this tragedy. So if this is something that content-wise is not, you don't feel comfortable listening to, I just want to give that caveat here.
Yeah.
So you have a choice to know what this is going to be about. So Netflix's The Maternal Instinct documentary covers the murder of a woman named Regan Simmons Hancock and her baby. The murder of Regan Simmons Hancock, who was 21 years old, a wife, a mother, a daughter, and her unborn child, Braxlyn Sage Hancock. Already named, already loved, already anticipated by this family.
Yeah.
These two beautiful humans were taken way too early. Regan never got to meet her daughter. Her daughter never got to live the life that she was meant to live. This really, really matters. So I want everyone to just remember these victims here and honor these victims and their families who endured and still endure and will forever endure this tragedy, and they are grieving. That really is at the center of the topic that we discussed today. Again, we're not going to go into every single detail of the story because A, it's really disturbing, but B, it's been told a million times.
Right.
But we really want to honor these victims by understanding dynamics, by understanding people. So I just want to kind of really, really hit that home that is the purpose of this discussion.
Why these things happen in the world, right?
Why do these things happen in the world? I think that's also something we've touched upon before with real crime stories is that our brains are meant to keep us safe. So when we watch these stories, we're kind of looking for evidence of how can we avoid this harm? Because the fact of the matter is bad things are going to happen, but how can I keep myself safe? So I think that's always kind of in the background of like how we are trying to stay alive. And of course, we can't always control the outcomes of what happens to us in our life, but we can. I think that does draw us to why we watch or listen or consume real crime. So why are audiences so kind of fascinated by this in particular? It was such deception. I would think that it violates one of our strongest assumptions is that pregnancy and motherhood represent safety and nurturing. To give a little bit of like a context to this is that Taylor Parker, who was the murderer, spent months convincing friends and family and her partner even that she was pregnant.
Yeah. I want to say, too, that they actually knew each other for quite some time, the victim and the perpetrator. The perpetrator was their wedding photographer originally. They took photos of their wedding.
Yep.
And so it was like this, they had a friendship.
They had a friendship, they had a relationship.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. And the documentary goes into this a little bit more, but Taylor has a very long history of deception, of lying. So there was always these kind of like red flags that were popping up along the way that I think people ignored, of course, because at the core of most humans is that assuming people are good. And I think that if we see a pregnant woman, we assume safety, nurturing, you have to be just going through so much. So sometimes like we want to give people the benefit of the doubt, of course, but in these situations where Taylor committed such horrible violence, we have that cognitive dissonance where we're like, wait, someone who was pregnant, how could they go so far to commit a murder? And that our brains just cannot make sense of that.
Because Taylor was telling I think it was her husband at that point, but everybody that she was pregnant, right? And just kept this lie going. And that's what generally happens in these cases is somebody, it's this deception of being pregnant, and then you've got to you're convincing all these people, and we'll get into the why this occurs. And then everybody gets on board and believes it, because why would you question somebody that says they're pregnant? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
And the lengths that this woman would go to continue the lies was almost like the longer the lies, the string of lies became, the stronger she committed to it. I mean, it was just not just about this pregnancy. It was about how much money she had, the stories she had. She made it sound like she was going to inherit millions of dollars. I mean, it was almost like if you think of every Netflix documentary that you've seen about a con artist, Taylor was all of them combined in one.
100. Yeah.
I want to give just a stat here too, just about fetal abduction. According to organizations such as the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, fetal abduction is extremely rare. Fewer than a dozen well-documented cases have occurred in the United States over several decades. Victims are almost always near full-term pregnancy. The offender is most commonly a woman, and most offenders have fabricated a pregnancy for weeks or months before the crime. So the homicide isn't really like an impulsive, but they plan, they lie. Sadly, I recall something very similar happening here in Colorado about 10 years ago, almost to the T, exactly the same story. And it's so horrible that you just can't wrap your head around it. I mean, I know everyone listening is like, you just really cannot comprehend the horror.
Yeah, I looked that up because it's pretty rare. And I believe there's only about 24 documented cases in the U.S. That's not globally because there's more numbers, but in the U.S., 24 documented cases of this fetal type of abduction. So it is really rare, but when it happens, it's just very jarring. And obviously it grabs all the attention of the news media and it becomes really big. And then we have documentaries and things like that about it. Yeah, I did read the one about the one in Denver as well. And it's just so sad what happens.
Yeah. I don't know even how to phrase it. It's like the victim survived. So
yes, I saw
they
that.
were not murdered, but I still feel like it's such a horrible tragedy.
Their child is murdered, right?
Yeah,
and it's so traumatizing. Yeah, it's so terrible on all kinds of levels. And so you're right with the actual fetal abduction is pretty rare. But, there's this other part that I think kind of goes into this is that there is pregnancy deception that happens for people. And it kind of, comes into this whole deception around a pregnancy. And that actually happens more often. I was looking at an article from 2018, and it was talking about like 8.4% of women. This also affects men. So 9.7 of men have experienced kind of reproductive coercion in their lifetime. And that, it mostly this is not occurring in healthy relationships, right? It's occurring in generally abusive relationships or where people are, deceptive, manipulative. That's not a healthy relationship. But I thought that was interesting too, this actual pregnancy deception, because I honestly think, people know stories of deceptions or where people, young people maybe like, yeah, I'm pregnant or whatnot, and maybe they're not. And I just think that happens more often.
This perpetrator was married to a man named Wade, who is in the documentary as well. This individual
she's a criminal. She's a criminal. In the Texas State Penitentiary.
She's on death row. I think it's the youngest woman on death row in Texas. And Texas, Rebecca.
I know.
Rebecca's in Texas.
They don't wait very long.
They really don't. They get right to it. That's Texas for you. The perpetrator here was pretending to be, pregnant and deceiving Wade, their partner, built this entire identity. And like you said, connected with Reagan through photography. What happened was, if we're looking at this from how did this happen? How can I keep myself safe? We're looking at it from like the trust issues. So there was trust that was established. Reagan was not making any bad decisions here. Reagan was being a human who trusted people. And healthy people assume others are telling the truth.
Yeah.
And that's a thread that I see throughout this entire documentary is, well, she seemed so nice and everyone assumed that they were telling the truth. There were people who were like, but wait a minute, this person had a hysterectomy. They are not able to have children. So there were people who knew this actually can't be possible and trying to kind of like throw out the warning signs. What happened where this individual, this criminal, this perpetrator had a life of just continuing to tell lies? This does not happen overnight. This does not happen overnight. This behavior likely started, and I'm using my therapy hat assumptions here. There were discussions in this documentary around Taylor's mother. They had a really bad relationship or a tumultuous relationship.
Yeah, I feel like that wasn't super clear in the documentary because what we heard was Taylor, who's the criminal, the perpetrator in this, kept spinning this lie that their mom was terrible and almost like to create this like, I need you to feel sorry for me. And like, oh, poor me, I don't have this relationship. But we never got the mother's side of this story. And what I've seen like kind of after the fact, I've heard a few like jail calls where the mom is actually talking to Taylor in prison. Basically one time she's like, look, are you seeing a psychologist? Because this behavior is not right. Like she's being very firm about her behavior being wrong and inappropriate. We don't know the details, but just from the brief stuff I've seen, my guess is that the mom had some boundaries with Taylor and said, look, this is not okay, this behavior, because the behavior had been ongoing, this manipulation and deception and untruths for years, right? Because she has children with another person as well. And the mom and other people in life probably just started setting some really firm boundaries, which is healthy. And we talk about that in therapy with people. And what happens then is the person that you're setting the boundary with then spins it however which way they need to, because they have to live with somebody shutting them out eventually, right? And so, and then in Taylor's mind, she spins it to everybody else that they have this horrible relationship. When in fact, it may not be considered really horrible. It's just that the mom, her parent, is trying to have a healthy boundary with her and say, she's called her out for her behavior. That's why Taylor says her mom, it's like a really bad relationship and she's terrible.
Yeah, which is, to me, says more about the things that are going on with Taylor and whatever
100%,
psychology is going on in her mind. And I also want to be very clear that this is more of an understanding versus I am not excusing Taylor's behavior. This is not at all an angle I want to entertain. It's just more of, this is something we see in therapy where when there's fracturing in the family early on, this is how sometimes it starts to present itself for people who have had either loss or abandonment, which now that I'm kind of reading some notes here, it says that Taylor's brother testified that their father was often absent, involved with drugs, and prioritized other relationships over his children. The brother described a chaotic childhood with instability and neglect from their father, which to me, that's going to play into abandonment issues, trauma. I don't know the details, of course. We don't know the details of what exactly happened, but that could result in someone having this like fractured childhood, instability that would result in these behaviors that Taylor obviously was exhibiting. And so the relationship with her mom sounds to me like the mom, for whatever, relationships they had growing up, it sounded to me from the documentary and the things that we do know that Taylor's mom was almost like not afraid of her per se, but kind of afraid of her, that Taylor was so volatile that if the mom took a wrong turn, that the mom was afraid of losing access to the grandchildren.
Because that often happens, right?
Yes.
They'll threaten, like, you can't see your grandkids if you don't excuse my behaviors, essentially, right? It's not that clear, but it's this whole underlying of manipulation. And I think I want to draw another point here, and I'm not saying that if people do this in their lives that they're a criminal, but in a way, what was happening here with these boundary setting, potentially by the mom, and then how Taylor was reacting to them, that happens in just everyday life. And you don't even necessarily have to have like a severe trauma background. It's like relationships are complicated. Human relationships are complicated and things can happen. And somebody can be like, I don't like the way the person maybe is treating me or whatever they're doing. And so you set a boundary. And then the person that's on the receiving end of the boundary oftentimes has feelings about it. They may even start thinking about, like, I'm on the receiving end of this boundary. That means that this person maybe doesn't like me anymore, or they're trying to, I think people interpret it as that my behavior is bad or that I'm a bad person then. That's not what a boundary is. But I just want to draw the point that we're talking about this, the jumping off for this conversation is this Netflix documentary and this crime that happened. But a lot of this type of human behavior stuff happens in our everyday life too. Maybe not to the degree that this
results
happened.
In this tragedy, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Because some of this is like human behavior. When we watch something like this, we can look at, I think I get fascinated about the human behavior. Like, why would you do this? And I think that's what other people are thinking too. But then with our, mental health, education, and our lens and training, we're able to kind of also peel back layers and be like, I can see how the dots are connected here. By seeing how the dots are connected doesn't mean we excuse a behavior. It means...
No, it's just, it's an understanding. And I think to your point, with these documentaries, we're looking at the extreme cases. We're looking at the extreme disorders, situations, the tragedies, really. And I think that's what, like I've said before, we're all kind of like looking at this as to be like, how can I avoid a tragedy? But the other point that I wanted to make is, like, if we are looking at this from a connection standpoint, Taylor had such a, what it seems like, unstable childhood. And that can lead to needing to create stability. By doing that, you can start to, like, create your own stories and lies and to make your world what you want it to be.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm guessing. I don't know the whole story, but I'm guessing that because of that instability, that lack of confidence in herself, because she never received the confidence building from her upbringing, that she had to go to extremes to create that for herself at any cost. Now, this is not common, obviously, but there are traits that I did see in the documentary, and I think it might have actually been after the fact of, like, reading some notes about it, but some of the experts described several psychiatric conditions and disorders while prosecutors were trying to kind of, like, understand what was going on with her. Again, we're not explaining this in the sense of excusing, but it's just more around personality disorders. They present as very unstable relationships. This is not a blanket statement. If someone listening has been diagnosed with this, I just want to be very mindful of that. This is not something that, like, equally, that this equals that you are a bad person. It just means this is how it presents itself, and this case is specific to be a very extreme case. So let me just make that disclaimer. None of these disorders predict this level of behavior either. So I just also want to make that clear. Unstable relationships, impulsivity, emotional dysregulation, attention-seeking or dramatic interpersonal styles, and difficulty with empathy or interpersonal boundaries. So that could be what we diagnose as borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. Childhood trauma, often contributing factor into these disorders. It's not the end-all be-all, but I think it's just to understand the psychology behind it. I would venture to guess that played a huge part, is either one or some of these diagnoses with Taylor because of the lack of connection that she had and support, and that internal gauge of what is good and bad. Millions of things could have contributed to this. I mean, the thing that I always notice, especially with these cases, is that a lot of the people are like, but they were so nice. And it's like, yes, they can be very, very nice, but another warning sign is if they can really turn on a dime. Like, you're either all good or all bad.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about your work in the field of criminal justice, and I'm speaking probably specifically about antisocial personality disorder because it's pretty common. How many people are really nice? I have met tons of nice people in the criminal justice system, and nice people do bad things still. I think that's just because they're nice doesn't mean somebody's not going to do something bad.
The thing that I would venture to guess as well, and this is very similar to the last week documentary we discussed, The Crash with Mackenzie, is that the underlying tone of especially these two women is that their behavior is is really for their gain. So their friendship, there's a manipulation, doing this wedding shoot or doing this, anything that's like developing these relationships is because Taylor had a secondary gain here. And that was befriending people who were pregnant, so there's the genuine care that came across was completely empty. Now, did she maybe like people to a certain extent? Sure. But through all the relationships that we heard, especially the partner she was with was like, always knew something was off, you always kind of keep a little bit of a distance. And you and I were talking about this before we hit record, which is like, we know stranger danger. We know that if something doesn't feel right with a stranger, it's very easy to spot that and trust that gut feeling. But when it's someone that you are maybe closer with, it's harder to discern, to be like, and that's what we were talking about earlier, is that most of us are good people with good hearts that want to assume the best in people. So when you have a friend that's maybe pulling some of this stuff, you want to explain it away and be like, well, maybe they're just going through a tough time or, but
we want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I mean, typically we as humans want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think that's where the rub comes, right? We want to do that. And then it's like, but then we end up excusing certain behaviors that we're getting, like our body's even giving us like, ooh, like sometimes it's like a kind of a visceral reaction, like, I don't like how this feels. But then we go back to, but you know what? They're having a hard time. We start excusing their behaviors. And so I think that kind of goes into like, why would Taylor's husband stay with her? Or why would a partner stay with someone? Or why would you remain to be friends with someone that are doing these things? And I think a lot, part of it is like this confirmation bias where that's where we go to, but they're nice. They give me a birthday gift all the time. They, they send me cards. She's always available at home to me, like as her partner or whatnot.
But here's the other thing, Rebecca.
Yeah.
And tell me if I'm wrong here.
Okay.
My guess, and people out there listening, if you have someone in your life that does this, it's a red flag, is that they always seem to flip it on you. My hunch is Taylor was super sugary sweet, but if something came up and someone was like doubting her or questioning her, she would manipulate and question you. These types of people, and I'm just going to say it, they're the ones that write paragraphs of text messages.
Okay.
That's a symptom that I have like made up in my head because people who have normal conversations do not do the volume paragraphs of text messages. If you have someone in your life, I'm sorry, but if you have someone in your life that has conversations with you and tries to do like really serious conversations through only text message and just drops volumes in a text message, that's a red flag to me.
That's not just a red flag. That's like a forest fire. Like, I feel like that's
it's not normal.
Your attention. It is not normal. No.
If
it's
you have to go
deflection.
to that, it's deflection. And not only that, it's wildly unhealthy communication.
Yeah.
And it's not being able to confront because you have to hide behind your manipulation and lies. And you just want to spew it to other people. It is the easy way out. And people that do this don't like to be confronted. They don't want to face the truth. They don't want to be challenged because it threatens their sandcastle that they've built. And one little thing is going to take down that sandcastle. The castle made out of sand is going to take it down quickly. I can read these people like a book. I mean, if I have like a pretty good radar for stuff like this.
Radar, yes.
I really do, because there's people in my life that I've seen deal with people like this, and I always say, like, if you're getting novels of text messages, run.
Right.
Because if you can't have a conversation in person, and this is the only thing that they can do is lob a grenade through a 10-paragraph text message, warning signs.
Yeah, and I think, like you're saying, it's just like this barrage of like almost like they're word vomiting all this shit to you because they are activated, right? And so they're just like going on and on and on. And that is like, if people are doing that to you in your life, I'm not saying necessarily cut that relationship off because I'm not your therapist. I don't know what the relationship is, but I think you need to set some real boundaries. Like, that's not acceptable. And you can't talk to me like that. And so maybe you decide like, Okay, great. And I'm not having this conversation with you. And then don't answer the phone. Don't respond to the text. Block it, or you can even block it for a time being. And then if it's like a friendship that you feel really like you need in your life, like you've been friends for 20 years or as a family member, then it's like, okay, you just set the boundary and say, when you are calm and can have a rational discussion, maybe we can talk about it. But at this point, I'm not going to do this. Mm-hmm. And so I think I like the sandcastle that you talk about, which is basically their identity is built as a sandcastle, and it's very fragile.
It's very fragile, which is why they're doing so much to maintain it. Which is why
it's so much work to maintain.
They work so hard to maintain it, which is why these text messages happen.
They are holding on.
The unfortunate thing is they don't have the emotional intelligence to know that's what they're doing.
Right,
but
they don't.
We do. And so we can set the boundaries, and that is going to activate them even more.
Yes.
Because they can't, it's like oxygen to them to have people that they can feed into and land all this bullshit on. So if you take away their oxygen by not engaging, that's going to activate. Yeah. Well, and they're going to probably get activated. And
oh, that's true.
You know what I mean?
They get activated. Yeah. They get activated.
They're going to be a little more upset, a lot more text messages about how horrible of a person you are because they like to flip the script because they're
trying to engage you then at that point.
They want you to take the bait.
Yeah. So here's the thing that happens behind this though, is we have two things will come up. People are like, I feel like guilt and shame. The person with the sandcastle that is lobbying all this terrible stuff or doing all this manipulation is really just, this is for everybody's understanding. This is not for us to excuse behaviors, but to understand, because this is what happens. We're all like, why is this person acting so nutty or crazy, or what is wrong with you? You're losing your shit. It's based on shame. They won't be able to name this to you, but they are feeling an immense amount of shame. And shame is, I'm a bad person. Mm-hmm. And when I'm a bad when I feel like you're saying I'm a bad person, I think any of us get activated. So if I was going around saying that you're a bad person, Joy, you're probably going to have some feelings about it because you're going to be like, that's bullshit. I'm a really great person.
Yeah.
I know that's something that really activates me.
But how would you add in here, especially with the case with Taylor, how would you explain, because Taylor does not have the empathy or awareness,
right,
to care about the shame is so deep that it just isn't accessible because
I don't think they realize it.
Yeah.
They don't know. And even it would take a lot of therapy to get them to recognize why they have to understand it, right? Because they're not even in the space of, they're not even in the library of understanding. Right. They're way down in another world.
So disconnected from human empathy.
Yeah.
That is what I think is really hard for us normal humans to understand.
Yeah.
That is really what the difference is here, because Rebecca and I could be shame and most of us feel deep shame pretty quickly if we feel like we did something bad or we internalize it and it's like, I'm a bad person. This individual didn't feel that. They immediately were like, I mean, they were, you saw the footage, if you saw the documentary of them in the hospital bed, just sticking so hard to this lie, where the investigators were like, the jig is up, girl. We know
the doctor knows. Hello.
The doctor knows. And even the nurses immediately, the nurses I feel so bad for the people who had to respond to this.
Yeah.
The first responders were like, something's off here. And she was just so committed, and that disconnect is dangerous. So if you have people in your life, hopefully most of the people listening do not, but if you run across a person where that disconnect is something's off here, trust your gut. Ask the questions. If they respond and react to you very quickly, remember we talked about responding versus reacting. If they go to reaction very quickly, that is a red flag. What are they protecting?
I also want to say too, when you're talking about empathy, is they don't have guilt. Guilt is one of those things that kind of keep us honest.
You're conscious. Yep. Your conscience.
Yeah. And that's when we feel, we believe we've done something bad. And people with that lack empathy do really never think they did anything bad or wrong.
Speaking of flipping the script here.
Yeah.
Taylor flipped the script and made it sound like that Reagan was coming after her.
Of course, because then you have to justify your action of, why did I take this baby? Then you have to go into a defense of, why did I kill somebody or kill two people? two human beings because I feel like my life was threatened. And that goes back into that deception and lies of like where the person has to try to save themselves. They're always trying to save themselves.
Yeah. Their priority is maintaining
Selfish.
the lie.
Yeah.
Maintaining the facade, because God forbid that come crumbling down and they're not exactly what people think they are. You know what, guys? Wrapping up here, the truth always comes out. Always.
Yeah. Kind of in closing, let's talk a minute about like what's healthy relationships, because we've talked a lot about unhealthy relationships and some of the things that can happen. But in a healthy relationship, you have honesty. You have accountability. You can ask difficult questions, have hard conversations.
You can say that again. You can ask difficult questions because you can have a reciprocal conversation about them. If you ask a difficult question and someone takes it as a threat, that's a red flag.
Because that's not a safe relationship, right? And so you can also recognize deception, like escalating deception. Like, in these stories we hear, like the things kept escalating, the lies kept building, and the partner was like, I'm just going along with it. And even other people started to be like, this is not real. This is not real. But he was just like, I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah. You know the case of Lacey Peterson.
Yes.
Everyone knows the case of Lacey, the story, the beautiful Lacey. I watched the documentary about Lacey Peterson, and her mother said at the beginning that Scott Peterson was always kind of going above and beyond to like make himself sound so great. And she's like, that's stuck with me. She even said to her husband at the time, like, I hope he's not feeding her a line of crap. Because she's like, at 25, why do you need to like tell me that you've done all these things? I see a parallel here with Taylor.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to make yourself feel better, and like, you know, these elaborate stories. If it's the elaborate stories where you're like, what? Inconsistencies, like paying attention to these things. Like,
a healthy relationship isn't doing this. A healthy relationship is like, here I am, here's all the good things about me, and here are my flaws too. And do you take all of that? I'm just trying to be a good person and being able to be honest and be like, yeah, I make mistakes. Sometimes maybe I'm not in the best mood, or you say these things, but you can have a honest conversation. It feels safe for both people. But if you can't have a difficult conversation or question without it getting escalated, then it's not a healthy relationship.
Yeah. And it could be potentially very dangerous. And
yeah,
my heart goes out to the families of this horrible, horrible tragedy. I just want to really highlight again that, you know, even just watching the documentary, you can see the pain in this family's life, and the loss was just so great. So honoring Reagan, honoring her baby.
Yes. Honoring
the families, honoring everyone around her, the first responders that had to deal with this tragedy, this horrible, horrible tragedy. I think it's so important to make that the period at the end of this sentence here, this episode, of that at the end of these stories where we ourselves are taking these stories because we want to protect ourselves and we want to look for areas where we can avoid this. It's so important to know that these families lived it and still live it and will live it forever. So as you're looking and listening to this podcast, I want you to send a prayer to the families, send some love to the families. And it should have never happened. It just should have never happened.
No. A lot of things should never happen, right?
It's really hard to watch these tragedies, not think like, why did this happen? Why did this happen? It's like, and that can really drive us crazy. And I think, you know, a lot of people do the what ifs. If I only would have gone home this day and at this time, instead of this time, I would have prevented this from happening. And that can really eat us alive. So I would encourage us, if that's something that's happened to you, you can entertain that for a few minutes, but really just shift your focus into taking care of yourself, because that train of thinking can really drive you nuts. So
and if you're having experience with somebody that you feel like is being deceptive or sending these long barrage paragraphs of text messages, find a therapist. Have a conversation with somebody that's not involved in the relationship, that has a clear mind, that is trained, and can provide you some techniques in how to handle it.
Yeah. Listeners, thank you for spending time with us today and letting us walk through this very, very sad tragedy. It's an honor to witness people's growth as a therapist. So I hope that we, if the family ever listened to this, I always think about if a family ever listened to this episode, did we do it justice in a way that made them not feel like, oh, there's another person talking about our story? Because it's just so sacred. So I just, we welcome any feedback if that's, if there's any parts that we didn't get right, or if there's things that you wish we would have talked about more or less, and any other, I guess, behaviors or things that might be helpful to explain. I don't want to look at these as stories. This is not a story. This is people's real life, and this is people's trauma. And so that to me is just the most sacred thing at the end of the day.
Thanks for listening. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. And if you have any comments or want to reach out to us, you can always email us at laughcryclub@gmail.com. We'll see you next week.
We will see you next week. You can follow us at Laugh Cry Club on socials. We love you so much.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.